glory of God's story.
Hello and welcome to another episode of God-Sized Stories. This week is very unique and special. I'm on vacation in Estes Park, Colorado, which means I'm 7,500 feet above sea level, and the oxygen is quite low. So you're going to hear a lot of as we're talking. I'm on vacation with family this week, and I have my awesome brother-in-law, Zach, with me today. Zach, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me, Craig. Hi, everyone. My name is Zachary Wisser, and I am an art teacher. I am 39 years old, married. I have 3 beautiful sons, 6 years old, 3 years old, and 1 year old. So we've been out here celebrating with them, and it's been a wild vacation with those little ones.
Yeah. Zach and I, we married into the same family, the Mirren family. We stole their 2 daughters, added them to ours. We changed their M last name into W last names, so we know what's up. And this has just been such a beautiful, amazing week. You know, we're just in the mountains. We're seeing crazy animals. You and I were just out for a car ride, and we literally were like face to face with an elk that was like, we thought it was a moose. So that's how big these crazy animals are out here. And in the whole time I've known you, a really big thing about you has been art. You mentioned you were an art teacher. And I know, like, when I started this project, this podcast, I wanted a real professional thumbnail. I didn't want to just, go into Paint and make some, pull a clip art of a microphone and just use Times New Roman to write the title on there. I was like, no. I want this to look good. I'm going to go to you because, you're one of the art people in my life that I love and respect. And I was like, hey, if I can reach out to people I know and be blessed by it, amen.
Amen.
Amen. And tonight we're going to talk about the power of art education because, as you said, you're an art teacher. It's really important to you. But I also know that education hasn't always really been an important part of your life. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I grew up in a bit of a broken home, divorced parents, and there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on education in my household. So naturally, I didn't put a whole lot of importance on it when I was a child. I never really thought that I was much good at any of the subjects that school sees as important. So English, math, things that are tested like that, I didn't feel so successful with those things, which I think made me feel a little bit like an outcast when it came to school, because those academic classes, it didn't come easy to me, and when I worked really hard at it, I still ended up mediocre grades. So naturally, I guess I started to resent it, and at some point, as a middle school kid, which you all know what middle school children, what you were like in middle school, I really struggled and almost got to the point where in 8th grade, almost was held back. And I guess that was kind of even for a young boy who's not serious and hates, doesn't like, whatever, it's kind of a wake-up call. So I guess in high school, what that did was made me try just hard enough to not be bothered, So never getting great grades, always getting mediocre grades, just enough so that my mom, who was busy trying to keep us fed,
Sure.
because, she was a divorced mom, she was just trying to keep a roof over our head, and she had time to bother us if we were getting Fs. But I think, I think a lot of you out there can kind of relate in some way to that, whether it's your own kids or you as a kid, where your parents would, or you yourself to your kids will jump in when you need to. And everybody has their own threshold of jumping in as a parent. And there's only so much that a parent really truly can do, because it does, in the end, fall on the student.
Yeah.
So I was not very interested in school. I had a little bit of resentment for school, and I just tried hard enough to just do okay. And honestly, in high school, if it wouldn't have been for some of my art classes and my art teachers, I don't know if I would have done that. I don't know if I would have had mediocre.
Right.
Honestly, I probably would have had really bad attendance records, and I think that the power of art gave me just enough motivation, just enough meditation to not completely shut out the academic world. So I had some really great art teachers, and I had one, Mr. Chapman, who was a really interesting guy. And so everybody who goes back to like their art teachers, maybe you can think of one that's kind of quirky, but this one in particular, he would do Tai Chi in the middle of the classroom.
Whoa.
Like when you would least expect it. and he would just be sitting there doing his moves, and you'd have a question about something, but you could not get him to
break trance.
To break his meditation. So,
oh man.
So he was an interesting guy and a good mentor because he was, very talented ceramist, and so I found myself engulfed in that world and took independent studies as a ceramic artist in high school. Just really fell into it and loved it. So graduation came, right, as it does. And as you or your loved ones have ever graduated and just said, like, now what? I told you that I didn't come from a household that put a lot of emphasis on education. So where was the funding for a college situation? Like, that wasn't in the cards.
Right.
Right. So I just think back then I was like, that's not going to happen for me. So what do? My dad was a phone man. I went and got a job at AT&T. Actually, I take it back. I take it back. I take it back. After high school ended, I was like, what am I going to do? I tried the cheapest college that I could find, which was community college right down the street from my house. And so I started that. And I failed out miserably. It was an iconic failure. Like chalk it up to like it was like the Titanic. But it was shorter.
Sure. Was it just because like lack of motivation?
Oh, for sure. It was very much a lack of motivation. And even though it was mostly my own money, I mean, I was just a blind kid, right? So I didn't know, I didn't know what was going on, and I just didn't like it. But it just seemed like the thing to do. You graduate from high school, you go to college, and I didn't feel motivated, and I didn't feel like I belonged there, and I still continued to get, instead of mediocre grades, less than mediocre grades at this point, because they were, more serious. I think colleges, they're a little bit more serious, and they're not gonna just pass you because you show up. You got to earn it. So I didn't do well, and so I went out and I was plan B. I'll do what my dad did, and joined. Oh my gosh, I did subcontracting for AT&T, and at the time, me and my guy who trained me were like always calling it AT and stupid, because it was kind of a ridiculous job. So it was a blue collar job, 7 days a week. Wake up, when the sun comes up, you're out there and you're digging around in people's crawl spaces, installing
fun stuff,
phone and cable, and you're up in people's attics in the middle of summer. So you're just about faced with death every day. And,
right.
And I remember it so clearly. It was a very clear moment when I was climbing a telephone pole in the middle of January.
Oh.
I was on my ladder. It was, negative, whatever. I mean, it's Chicago, so whatever.
Right.
I'm climbing my ladder. The wind is howling. I had already dropped all my tools in the snow and trying to find a wrench in the snow. So I was already climbing. I was already upset. So I was climbing this ladder, already screaming profanities in my head. And I'm climbing the ladder, and I get up there, and I'm trying to put on this little fitting. The little coax cable fitting, for your cable television. Yeah. So I'm up there on top of there trying to put that on with gloves on. So no, that doesn't work. Take the gloves off, bare fingers.
Oh, so cold.
So cold. Touching metal, ripping skin.
Oh,
right?
No.
So it was like that that was the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just had like, it was like a flash. Like, this is not where you belong.
Mm-hmm.
This is not where you belong. So I climbed off my ladder and I put my ladder back on my truck. I called my supervisor and I said, I'm leaving. I'm going home and I'm never coming back. I swear. And it was like that epiphany moment.
Yeah.
Crystal clear. I got down and I just quit and I left. And that day, and I went directly back to the community college to eat crow. And I said, you know, like, hey, I failed out last semester, but I'm back, you know, and feeling like just such a, you know, waste of space at that point. Just walking in there, I was like, all right. So that was hard. And I signed up, and the great thing about it was that it had changed my motivation. I mean, that perspective shift of having a job, you know, I'm sure a whole lot of you can relate to having a job where you're just miserable, right? And what can you do to break that? So I broke it and to school, and I did great. The motivation had changed, and I knew at that point that I wanted to go after something that was more
beneficial to the heart.
I think I needed something that was, how do I say it? Like, it just, I knew I wasn't in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Something drew me to something bigger.
Mm.
I did not feel like my talents were being utilized in that job. Like I said, my dad did that job his whole life. So God bless him.
Yeah.
And anybody else who does that sort of job. Because it is a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't for me. Something was calling me for something bigger. So I left. Went back to school. Did the work. I hated every minute of it. Not every minute of it. Just like math and English classes. Like I said, I wasn't good at that stuff. It did not come easy for me. So I feel like I spent double the time on all that.
But this time it was worth it.
But this time I had a goal in mind.
Yeah. Exactly. So now, how long have you been an art teacher?
So I've been an art teacher for 11 years now.
So you've seen a lot of stuff as an art teacher at this point.
Yeah.
And it's like, I bet you've seen, because you're in a pretty big district, so I'm sure you've seen a lot of kids, young Zach. You know, that was you way back then. Like, you know, obviously everyone's different. We all have our own thing, but you see the struggle.
Oh, I see me in a lot of students, for sure.
So give us an example of a time that you've seen, you know, because like now that obviously it sounds like that's why you're there, is to try to help those kids who were you now. Like, you don't want them to have to struggle through being a repairman, or the AT&T guy up on a pole in the middle of winter. You want them to realize, go after it now. Give me an example of maybe a student or two that you've seen that happen, where you've had the opportunity to maybe shine that light to them.
I have seen a lot of students, countless students, who have even just a slight spark of interest in the arts move on to college for science, for communications, for, I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
They have to live their own path. They have to live their own path. They have to figure out for themselves. But the interesting thing about it is, and I try to talk candidly to my students about my story and about how I went down the path that I thought was the right path for me, the path that is kind of the status quo. Like, after high school, you go to college, and then you go get a job, and then, you know, the 9 to 5, you know.
And then you get a house, and then you have kids.
I have kids, but it just isn't, I don't know if it's that way. I thought it was. They all think it is. You're young. I've seen a lot of students do that, and, you know, I try to tell them that you might have to figure it out the hard way. You might. I've seen, oh my gosh, I have some students that I feel like because of, and it's not just me, it's my team.
Sure.
It's my team. I work with a fantastic team of art educators who have just such a diverse platform of knowledge, and we don't ever tell a kid like, this is, you have to do this, like well, maybe like one or two, or you're like, you're so talented, like if you don't do this, it's
right.
But majorly, our students, we just kind of guide them, and if they want to go to an art school or something like that, we say, if that's what you think your path should be, then do it. But I've had, oh my gosh, I've got a student who graduated. Oh my gosh, I want to tell you about Chris. Chris was a student of mine who, obviously a very smart student, but just like me and a lot of other people, bored, not interested, maybe alienated by core subjects in school. He was in my comedy club. I ran a comedy club at school. Like a bunch of kids who thought they were funny. So we would do improv comedy, and this kid was hilarious because he was smart. You know people who are like quick.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh,
that's not
you
me.
are quick. It's because they're smart, and so this kid was super smart, and he was pretty good at art. I don't know, maybe he's one of those kids that's kind of good at everything.
Oh man,
Gotcha.
We all kind of hate that person.
A little bit.
God loves them, but boy, I need to love them more.
No doubt. So this kid, he graduated, and he was one of the kids who he was like me. He didn't have money, and he didn't see college as like the right avenue for him, and he felt pressured into it for sure. He felt pressured into it, and we said, there is that pressure, and I explained to him, like there's that pressure to go to college and get a job and be that guy, but maybe you're not that guy. Maybe you don't have to go to college, and maybe here's this other way. So he went out and he toured with Warped Tour.
Oh, sweet.
And sold T-shirts that he made, and he did custom drawings on instruments, guitars, drums, things like that, and would sell that stuff. And he toured with them for several years and made a little bit of money. It got him by.
Right, but it got an experience.
And that's a college all in itself, right? Yeah. It's an experience. That is education in a way. And then he's also doing stand-up comedy.
Perfect.
So he's studying at Second City in Chicago as a stand-up comedian. And he's just hilarious. He's hilarious, and he's a talented artist, and it's one of, many people. I will tell you one more story.
All right.
About a kid who's now an adult. These people that I talk about, I say they're kids, but they're
because you knew them as kids.
They're adults now.
Yeah.
This young girl, Chelsea, she was not supposed to be in an art class. She is the most logical, the most cerebral, the most follow the rules kind of girl that you would ever see in an art class. And we were all kind of just looking at her like, is she gonna make it? Like, she's very she wants to know the instructions. She's not okay with just some fluffy instructions about just be the art. She just wants to know this, and she wants to know step by step, and she wants so she's a very literal person. But we shoved her into the direction of graphic design because that's the type of person that entails. It's not a fine artist field necessarily, but being this young lady, she went down to Peoria and she made the town hers. She branded the entire town. She went to every restaurant with logos and with hand-drawn signature type stuff.
Wow.
Custom stuff for each business in the town. And said, look what I made for you. Do you want to buy it? That's the type of business lady.
Oh, man.
Okay? So you get a very smart person.
Yeah.
Who is logical and very step-by-step, that also has a creative hand. And you send her down to a little well, it's not that little. It's probably one of the biggest cities in Illinois.
Yeah.
You send her down there, and she just took it over.
Awesome.
Now she's in Chicago. Now her designs are in the Field Museum.
Oh.
So watch out.
She's coming.
She's just, I don't know. So when I think back on my 11 years, I've got just countless amounts of people who enjoy being in our little atmosphere, our little eclectic art community within a building. And like that Chris kid that I was talking to you about, he I don't know, he might not have made it. He was so bored. He might have dropped out. I don't know. But now he's doing great.
It's so, like, there's a couple things I pull from this that just really encourage me so much and thinking about bringing it to this podcast, too, and this idea of, like, the power we have to inspire other people. Like, God gives us gifts, but He doesn't give them for us. Like, He's made you a good artist, but He's also made you an incredible instructor.
I would have to interject and say that I'm a better teacher than I am artist.
I don't know. I've not actually seen you teach. Yeah. I've seen you art quite often, and the listeners have as well with the thumbnail. And you've done infinitely better things than the thumbnail. And it's like I'm so encouraged to hear that, like, you picked up on that. You picked up on, like, as you said a while ago in this podcast, is like your talents, your gifts weren't being used.
Right.
And when you realize, like, you kind of stopped and thought, like, oh, wait, maybe I could use my gifts. Maybe I could use my talents. And that was motivating. And it's like you came to this place where you realized those gifts and talents could be used for so much more than just having a job. Because, like, obviously, like, when you're talking about other things like running a comedy club thing at the school, like running a comedy group, like, that's above and beyond. Like, that's because you care about these kids. Like, if all you were doing was being an art teacher, I'm going to come in and I'm going to leave and I'm going to grade their drawing, like, right. You could get away with that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that have lost their motivation from life, and maybe they need, like you did, maybe they need to shift, because we have so many great uses for our hands and our feet and our mouth. The Lord could use us for unlimited things. We just need to guide that motivation in the right way. So that's one thing I've really grasped onto a lot with this. And just the other is, and it's like I've talked about this before, is just like, and we said, like, the power of art education is this kind of overall theme, but even in general, about that, the power of art, like what it does for us. Mm-hmm. And like we were talking a little bit earlier, we're in the mountains right now, and before we existed, it was God, and He created beautiful art. Like, this is like, I can't buy a good enough camera to fully show the detail and the beauty of the art of just these mountains. And I sat for so long earlier today at a waterfall and just sat and looked at it. And I tried to like take a video of it to like appreciate it. And I'm just like, this is great. And the video I'm going to make with this is not going to be 1/10 as great as it was to just sit there and stare and soak in. Like, we have the power to create as well. Like, God created this, and He gave us then the power to create. Like, you've made some really awesome art that has inspired people as well. And then as well, you're inspiring people to create art that inspires people.
Yeah, that's where it's at. I mean, I don't necessarily think that my art or most of my students' art is anything that's going to compare to...
Well, sure, but even if it inspires them.
But what it is about, though, is that human connection. And personally, for me, my work is never about trying to capture what God has created, because,
good luck.
Like you said, I mean, that's a journey. That's an omen's task. And I'm more about the use of art as meditation. Mm-hmm. It's, just like prayer. Mm-hmm. It's just like meditation. So, and I know there's a good chunk of students that I have that I push them to do that, to use that, because I do have so many social, emotional students who need something to get through anxiety and depression and things like that. So I guess there's just so many avenues of my job that
Right.
it's like, it's as if, if we're talking about careers and stuff like that, it's almost like we lost a huge 95% of people who don't go on to have any job with any sort of creative power, but if it can give them the power to meditate, if it can give them the power to have some confidence, then those are, that's what it's about. And it's relationships as well. So,
and as you said before, like kind of just like, and we've talked in the past, like getting set on this path and realizing our path, because like we can totally, like, we're obviously to an extent oblivious to what our path is. Like God, ultimate, once again, like if He can create the mountains, He can see so much more than we can. And like I love we were talking earlier, like you were talking about like you were on this path. It's like you had this, you just like you finally got out of school and then you're like, I'm gonna just have a job, and then all of a sudden it was like poof, 180. You went back the other way.
180.
And it's like,
so I did a 360.
Exactly, there you go.
It was,
and it's like
staggered.
There's so many times throughout Scripture where I feel like there's been many men and women where it's like like you were talking about, you had this feeling. Some people, like, it's like this is their calling. And it's like, and it's like you just look at, like, I love reading just in the Gospels when Jesus goes to get his disciples, and it's like He just tells them to come, and it's kind of like one of those situations where they're like, okay. Like these dudes, they're out there fishing, and He's like, follow me, and they're like, okay, bro.
Wasn't really feeling what I was doing.
Yeah, it's like, let's just leave these nets here. Let's follow this guy. Like the power. Like if they would have been like, nah. Like God used the apostles for unbelievable things, and if they just would have been like, no, I'm good on this boat.
I'm gonna stay right here where I'm miserable.
Exactly. It's like, I'm just gonna keep sitting in this tax collector's booth and being hated by everyone. I'm good, thank you. But instead they listened and they were like, my life can be more.
Yeah.
Like, the Lord has so much for my life. I could be used for such great things. So, audience, I really want to encourage you with that. I have a challenge. How about this? Because, like, I've got Zachary here talking about, like, attempting to meditate with art, which I love the idea of. Find a way to do that. Like, whatever art is to you, because art is such a creative platform. Like, I don't want to say pull out a sketchbook and start drawing, because that might not be what art is to you. Try to find what art is to you and take that time and meditate and think about your life. Like, really see, like, am I in the right spot? Are my gifts and talents being used? And yeah, maybe you're not able to do a 180 career change, but maybe that means you pick up a new hobby where your gifts and talents are used. That's what I had to do. Like, this might not be my best gift of in doing podcasts, but I felt that a while ago. I was like, man, there's got to be more that God has for me than what I'm doing now. And it was like, boom, it just clicked. Kind of like you're saying, it's like, I got to do this now. So, listeners, please just take that time, figure out what it is. Maybe you think you are the worst artist in the world. Trust me, I think I am the worst artist. And I'm being interjected again.
I would just say this. The feeling that I have when I draw, because I can draw, and I'm a good drawer, and okay, but that doesn't matter. You don't have to draw. You don't have to paint. You don't have to make art, because the same feeling that I get when I make art is the same feeling that I get when I clean something, when I organize something, when I read a book. Anything that you can do to focus your mind in a way that sort of escapes time. When you focus your mind on something, and that's what drawing is. It's focusing your attention on something very particular. So if you clean, if you organize, if you go for a drive, if you go out into nature and stare into the forest, anything where like you kind of stop thinking about everything and think about one thing,
I like that. I respect that challenge. Let's rewind. Let's replace mine with whatever he is saying, whatever that is for you.
Whatever makes you lose track of time.
Yeah. Go do that this week. Whatever that lose track of time focus is for you, do that. Take a heart assessment during that time. And I can almost guarantee that you'll be blessed beyond your imaginations with the things you realize about yourself. Like, I know that can be like kind of cliche sometimes, like capture the power of yourself. But it's like God wants you to be inspired. There's endless power in you because he created you, and he wants you to use it. Go out and use it. Find out whatever that is. Zach, thank you so much for multiple things, obviously. Thank you for the thumbnail. I'll keep thanking you for that over and over. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thanks for being on vacation. Thanks for being with me in this family. But ultimately right now, thank you for just that little bit right there. Just kind of bring it back to this and kind of restructure my thought even in what this is. It's been a really big blessing to have you in my life in all of those ways. And audience, thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this without you. Goodbye.